The protests have now spread from yesterday's initial protest in Egypt. This is footage from protests in Iraq today. There were also protests in Lebanon, and in Morocco, and in Sudan, and in Tunisia, and in Iran, and in Bangladesh. We are told to possibly expect large protests tomorrow in Pakistan. Some of the most aggressive protests today came in Yemen. NBC's Richard Engel reports on that.
The protesters in Yemen set out to destroy the American embassy in Sana'a to punish an insult against Islam. Protesters climbed the perimeter fence, undeterred by Yemeni security forces who tried to keep them back with water cannons. The crowds pushed forward and managed to get inside the embassy parking lot, smashing windows, torching vehicles, using a forklift to do even more damage. This time, the U.S. Embassy was prepared. Staff was moved to a safe location. No one was hurt. In Cairo, another embassy under siege. But Egyptian security forces are finally taking decisive action. Riot police battled demonstrators all day. More than 200 were overcome by tear gas. As the air burned with the stuff, protesters told me their goal was to get to the Cairo embassy and take vengeance. Why, I asked. Because the United States has insulted the prophet, they screamed. Repeated U.S. statements that Washington has no affiliation with the offensive internet movie that sparked this crisis aren't being listened to here, just religious passion and the blindness of a mob. And Egypt's new president isn't doing much to calm things. President Mohamed Morsi from the Muslim Brotherhood said he supports protests against religious insults, but he also denounced attacks on foreign embassies. It was a condemnation, but a couched one. Egypt needs the West. Morsi is looking for nearly $5 billion in loans from the International Monetary Fund. The protests in Egypt and Yemen are small, but not isolated. There have been angry demonstrations in 11 countries so far. Half of them in places where Washington supported protesters who toppled their regimes, bringing more democracy, but also unleashing deep hatred and zealotry that is now focused on U.S. properties overseas.
Joining us now live from Cairo is NBC's chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel. Richard, thanks for being here again. I appreciate you staying up into the middle of the night. I know you spoke with those protesters outside the embassy today. Why do they believe the U.S. government is responsible for this anti-Muslim internet video?
Because they think the United States is secretly paying for not only this movie, but lots of activities like this. They think it is part of a hidden agenda, a secret plot where the U.S. condemns this kind of thing, but secretly funds organizations like this. And as evidence, they say, look what happened in Afghanistan. U.S. troops destroyed Qurans. You've had preachers in America who will burn Qurans, and movies that come out and are insulting to Islam. A series of events, yet no action is taken, and they believe that is evidence that the U.S. secretly wants this in order to undermine Islam, and that is also part of a plot that involves Zionists and the Freemasons.
Richard, in terms of, I know you and I have talked a lot over the years about the persistence of conspiracy theories, not just in the Middle East, but in lots of parts of the world, that the U.S. is seemingly powerless to penetrate. Is there anything that you think that U.S. diplomacy, U.S. leadership could do to disabuse the Arab Street in Cairo of those notions about what the U.S. government is responsible for?
A lot more education on free-thinking, history books. There is a mentality that has engulfed this region for the last 40 years. The region's dictators are, in part, responsible for imposing this mentality that is a closed circuit. It is a way of looking at the world that sees it through a conspiratorial paradigm. And that was convenient for the dictators because it got people hating the West, hating Israel, hating America, and not hating their own leaders who presented themselves as the only thing that could protect the people of this region from this onslaught that was coming in from the outside, and those mentalities don't die easily. It's the same kind of mentality you have in North Korea, by the way. It's not just in the Middle East. It's something that is indicative when you have a totalitarian regime. I was in North Korea and I spoke to the minders we were working with, and they were convinced that American school children every day wake up plotting how to bring down North Korea. And when I told them that is really just not the case, people in the U.S. don't wake up every morning trying to think how they can undermine the people of North Korea. They just didn't believe me. And that's a problem. You have this mindset that has been imposed on a region for a long time. And they need education, they need more free-thinking, and they need to break out of that conspiracy theory.
Richard, in terms of the scenes behind you and what we've been able to see tonight in terms of footage from Cairo, what can you tell us about the intensity of what's going on there and the change in the response from the Egyptian authorities that you described in that report that we just aired?
When the protests first broke out here, and it happened quickly, and demonstrators rushed up to the embassy, there really wasn't much of a response at all from Egyptian authorities. Protesters climbed over the embassy walls, they pulled down the flag, they put up a new flag, they climbed back over the walls, they wrote graffiti on the outside of the walls. That all takes time. The Egyptian authorities just sort of sauntered up and eventually chased them away. We saw a decisive change happening pretty much yesterday and then into today, where the Egyptian authorities moved out with riot gear, with tear gas, and decided to physically push people back from the embassy. And that's why you're seeing these heavier clashes, which only convince those who have a conspiratorial mind that they are correct. Why else would the Egyptian authorities be fighting back using American tear gas? Because once again, they are firing American tear gas on these people here. If they didn't have something to hide, if they weren't defending some sort of hidden secret conspiracy.
Richard, I know that you've spent a lot of time, not just in Egypt, but in Cairo specifically. Do you feel like it is, it's not just the protesters, that there's an overall hostility among the very large population of Cairo, or is this a small group that's not representative of the larger views of the population?
I think this is a small group. This is a group of Salafists. These are a group of, some of them are what you might even call soccer hooligans who've joined in. Some of them are unemployed people. They all share a common belief that what they're doing is right, to defend this video that has besmirched the image of Islam, besmirched the image, or the personage of Muhammad. But this is not representative of the larger situation in Cairo even. If you can, it's nighttime, so you can't really do it, but if you widen out, you can see those protests are happening in the corner of Tahrir Square and on a little street that goes down to the embassy itself. But if you widen out, there are still traffic moving around the rest of Tahrir Square. And if you go a few blocks from here, it's now 3:30 in the morning, so not much is going on, but earlier in the day, life was proceeding pretty much as normal. And I think there's a large segment of Egyptian society, society across the Middle East, that would be very happy to be done with this chapter and does not like what is going on here.
That is one of the first heartening things I've heard about the situation all day today. Richard Engel, NBC's chief foreign correspondent. Thank you again for your time and your late night, Richard. Stay safe. We'll talk with you soon.
My pleasure.
Thanks. All right. Someone who is not entirely clear, but someone makes a stupid and blasphemous video, which causes this to happen around the Middle East today. People incredibly angry with the U.S. government, which did not make nor condone said blasphemous video. Why that is and how that maybe can start to be fixed. It's coming up.